Welcome back to another episode of Cyclone InCYders. Matt Van Winkle, not joined this week by Sam Turner, but by a former guest of the show, a guest that's been on quite a bit. Dean Berhow-Goll is the assistant sports editor of the Iowa State Daily, going to join us for the rest of the show today. We're going to touch on quite a few things, Dean. We're going to talk about the loss to Kansas State from last Saturday. We're going to preview the big Oklahoma State game. We're also going to talk a little bit of Iowa State basketball for the first time this year on Cyclone InCYders. We had Media Day last week, so we've got a lot of things to cover. But, Dean, let's start with this Kansas State loss. Really a big opportunity for Iowa State to go to 5-1 on the year. A ranked team coming into Jack Trice Stadium, the number 5 team in the nation, and Iowa State just did not have things together. They just looked sloppy out there. Couldn't get the offense going, and yeah, now they're 4-2. So what happened, Dean?
You have to give credit to Kansas State's defense. They played really well. Jared Barnett, he's listed as 6 foot, but he played like he was a 5'9" quarterback. There were 4 batted balls down, completed only 16 of 36 passes. He really struggled. We talked to him tonight. He admitted it. He struggled. He was inconsistent, and offensive coordinator Courtney Messingham really stressed getting back to basics today. Even things like gripping the ball, his throwing motion, everything that includes that. It was a good play by Kansas State. We've got to give credit to that.
Yep.
I mean, that's now the number 4 rated team in the nation. They're the favorite in the Big 12 right now, led by a big guy named Colin Klein.
Yeah, and Colin Klein, definitely one of the best quarterbacks in the nation, if not the Big 12, and he really played a good game. Obviously, we knew he was going to come in and run the ball and throw the ball. He did both those things. Ran the ball, just really beat Iowa State to death on the ground. Iowa State only with 65 rushing yards in the game to Kansas State's 177. So really not the production Iowa State was looking for on the ground. They were out without James White, out with an injury. He's going to be out for the next couple of weeks, Coach Rhodes was telling us. So Chantrell Johnson got the start, as well as Jeff Woody, who had some meaningful carries in that game and his first touchdown of the season. So looking forward, though, is it going to be enough? Is missing James White going to hurt Iowa State in the future, do you think?
Well, it certainly hurts them because he's their most explosive player.
Sure.
With
the exception of Devondrick Neely.
That's fair.
Yeah.
That's fair. He brought it up tonight. If there was one position that they would have said at the beginning of the year that was the most deep, it was without question the running backs, because you have James White, you have Chantrell Johnson, you have Jeff Woody for those short yardage carries, and then you have 2 redshirt freshmen that are going to be outstanding when they become upperclassmen in Rob Standard and Devondrick Neely. But like you said, Chantrell Johnson, 9 carries, only 17 yards. Kansas State really just took away the running game, made them one-dimensional, and they made Iowa State lean on Jared Barnett, and Barnett just could not get the job done. But like you said, Colin Klein, 25 carries, 116 yards, 3 touchdowns. None of them over 12 yards, though. I think that was the biggest thing.
He killed them softly, if you will.
Yeah, killing me softly.
Yeah, exactly.
They lulled them to sleep.
Yeah.
Yards after yards after yards, and it wasn't Colin Klein hitting the hole like a running back would. He was so patient, so efficient, and Iowa State just could not stop him.
Yeah, and I think actually Jared Barnett can really learn a thing or two from Colin Klein, because with the zone read, Jared Barnett, he can be a mobile quarterback. He's got a decent arm, but I think if he's smarter, if he can wait for those blocks to happen, that was one thing that impressed you and me both about Colin Klein, was that he just waits for the blocks to happen. He doesn't rush things too soon. Really had some nice pressure up front, though. He had a lot of time to move around in the pocket. Had I think maybe a couple sacks in the game by the Iowa State defense. And let's look at the Iowa State defense in this game. They typically, when you look at an Iowa State team, if they hold the opponents under like 21 points, they're usually going to win the game. It was a 27-21 game, but what I think we're missing in this game was that big play on defense.
Right.
They had the one special teams turnover on that punch, which was a nice play by Morton, but no big turnovers in this game. A few batted down balls, a few big hits by Klein, Jeremiah George with that horse collar tackle, which that could be debated. I think that was a legit tackle, but they didn't have that big play that they were looking for, and that if they had that big interception, that big fumble late in the game, I think this game could be different.
It's fair. What you say is fair, because that's what they rely on a lot with their defense. They capitalize on those plays, and they've capitalized in their wins, but they didn't do that against Kansas State. They get a break. Matt Morton recovers that fumble on the punt, and the very first play, Jared Barnett, seam route, right side, tries to hit Aaron Horn, who led Iowa State with 7 catches for 84 yards.
Impressive game from Aaron Horn, yeah.
But he stared him down the entire time. Safety didn't even have to move, intercepted on the goal line. That was the biggest swing point, according to Paul Rhodes and everybody else in the stadium that was watching.
Yeah, that's one thing I was leaving out, was that big turnover by Jared Barnett. After that turnover that Iowa State forced, Iowa State had a huge chance to score in that second quarter, which in that second quarter they had scored 14 points. So they could have had a huge momentum going in halftime, give the ball right back to Kansas State, they go right down and score a touchdown, and they go up at halftime. And they never looked back. They never trailed after that point in the game. Really just looked very, very solid from that point on. Let's quickly talk about some stories coming from this game. Another guy that had a good game and has been having a very good season is Ernst Brunn. Quietly, I should say, having a good season. 4 touchdowns on the year. That's unheard of from an Iowa State tight end.
Right.
The most touchdowns scored since, I think, 1967 by a tight end at Iowa State. So really good stuff from Ernst Brunn, a guy that didn't start the year as the #1 tight end. Ricky Howard was that #1, I believe, beating out Kurt Hammerschmidt. So really nice surprise from Ernst Brunn.
Yeah, he's been more of a safety blanket guy. It's not like he's catching 5, 6, 7 catches per game, but he's been that safety blanket guy.
Yeah, and they're really crucial catches when he gets them too. And as we mentioned earlier, Jeff Woody obviously getting, and he's gonna need to get some more carries moving forward against Oklahoma State, which we'll touch on in the next segment. But had his first rushing touchdown of the season, and even though Iowa State loses and goes to 4-2, Dean, they're still ranked in the BCS for the first time in program history. And this came out, on Sunday night late. The team had just finished up their practice for the night, and the team's a little bit down, trying to move past this loss, and they come back and see that they are ranked 24th in the BCS. Were you surprised by this, Dean?
I was surprised because typically you don't see teams move up in the poll after they lose a game.
Right.
Certainly Kansas State is a very, very strong team, #4 in the nation now. But typically you don't see that. So certainly that was a surprise. But at the same time, when you think about it a little bit, you see some numbers, their strength of schedule, how tough the Big 12 is, which is unrivaled, unparalleled, except for probably the SEC. It makes sense now.
Yeah, and you look at their strength of schedule in the Big 12, and coming up, and I mean they've played Tulsa, who is undefeated aside from losing to Iowa State. So they've been playing well. Iowa's turning their season around, had a big win at Michigan State. So some critical wins in that. The computer rankings, factor in a lot of different things. So Iowa State 24th in the BCS rankings, so the first time in program history for them. Pretty good stuff. Coming up after the break, we are going to look at the Oklahoma State game. Obviously a big rematch from last year. A lot of revenge on the line. We're going to be talking about that coming up after the break. You're watching Cyclone InCYders.
Life in the Big 12 moves very fast this time of year, and you better respond fast if you're going to have any opportunity for success. I thought our kids responded that way yesterday as they came back to work, and we got a nice morale boost at the end of the day, discovering we were 24th in the initial BCS rankings.
They're going to be out for blood, and they're a fast team. Coach Gundy has them always very well coached. They know what we ended for them last year, so they're going to come in with a vengeance, trying to obviously take advantage of that emotion and that momentum, and we have to be able to match that intensity in order to pull out a win this weekend.
I mean, we're really excited. It's going to be a great atmosphere to go play in. Get a chance to go play Oklahoma State again. We're trying to put this loss behind us and get ready for this next week. But knowing that there's a lot of things that we need to fix that we messed up in the K-State game. Just things that we have to, just minor adjustments that we have to make just so that we're ready for this week.
Welcome back to Cyclone InCYders. Matt Van Winkle, Dean Berhow-Goll going to switch things over to looking at the Oklahoma State game coming up this Saturday down in Stillwater. A rematch, Dean, of the big win for Iowa State last year at home, and Jack Trice threw off the chances for Oklahoma State to make the BCS National Championship game. So you know that they're going to be wanting that win. They're going to be thirsty for it. Obviously, it's a little bit of a different team. Whedon and Blackman are not there to lead the offense this year. They've got a couple new guys, a freshman in Wes Lunt, who we think is going to be starting this game at quarterback. They've also got a guy named J.W. Walsh, who is another guy that's seen more snaps this year, so we're really not sure. We're not positive who's going to be starting this game at quarterback for Oklahoma State. Let's talk about them quick. J.W. Walsh, 70 of 107 this year, passing 9 touchdowns. Wes Lunt, 51-75 and 4 touchdowns. So I know you talked to one of the reporters this today from covers Oklahoma State, and he kind of told you that he's leaning towards West Lunt in this game.
We talked to Anthony Slater. He's of the Daily Oklahoman. He blogs for the Thunder and for the Oklahoma and for Oklahoma State. But what he said is he believes it's West Lunt. He thinks that right now Mike Gundy hasn't said anything just for the pure reason that you're not going to give away your hand, and so that plays to their strength for coaching, because now Rhodes has to coach up his defense to prepare for J.W. Walsh, who has 27 carries on the year, 7.7 yards per carry and 2 touchdowns. So he's a dual threat guy. But from what I understand, Lunt is the guy with the arm, and he's only a freshman. He's a little bit banged up, from what I understand. He's most likely to start.
And looking at Oklahoma State, they're 3-2 on the year. Had a big blowout win against Savannah State to start the year, 84-0. They're 1-1 in the Big 12 with a win last week over Kansas, which Walsh started that game and played all the snaps. So a little bit surprising for me to hear that West Lunt is kind of the favorite to start against Iowa State. But they had a close loss against Texas, which we were hearing earlier. They lost on a goal line stand to Texas, which we were talking during the break that they might be ranked if they have that win. They would be, have 4 wins instead of 3, have a big win against a ranked team. Texas ranked number 12 in the nation. They had a loss against Arizona earlier in the season, which would have been another big win for them.
Right.
Got blown out in that game. So looking at their schedule, how tough do you think this game is going to be for Iowa State?
Well, I think any game in the Big 12, because of how strong it is going to be tough, because there's so much parity.
Yeah.
And like you said earlier, they lose to Texas by 5, primetime Saturday night game. If they win that game, they're probably ranked. They're coming in this year at 4-1, tough loss early in the year by 21 points to Arizona, to Rich Rod's new team. But they're nothing to be overlooked.
Right.
Okay, I mean, and certainly we discussed that they lost Blackman, they lost Brandon Whedon, but they bring back the running back Joseph Randall, who is very explosive. He's very underrated in the Big 12. Not a big name, but they are equally explosive, and they rank in the top 10 in every statistical category offensively.
Yeah.
A little strugglesome on defense, but this is a team they're still trying to figure out who they are. They only win by 6 over Kansas. They start J.W. Walsh, like you said. Yeah. It's a dangerous game, because Iowa State. Certainly, they're thinking about last year. Oklahoma State is certainly thinking about last year. I saw something on Twitter where a Oklahoma State player tweeted that if they hear the name Iowa State, they go back into the weight room and do 10 more reps.
Wow.
So that's something that as an Oklahoma State fan you like to hear. Makes you a little bit worrisome as an Iowa State fan.
Yeah, absolutely. Randall, 614 yards on the ground, 6 touchdowns. So this team can score, and they're averaging 50 points per game, which is the 3rd most in the nation. Obviously, that win against Savannah State kind of bumped up their stats a little bit, that 84-0 win.
Sure.
But this team can score, and as you were saying, Whedon and Blackman not being there, that doesn't matter. This team can still score. They're top 10 in passing, top 10 in rushing. As you said, this is just a really good team. Defense is giving up 28 points per game, and I think that's a number that I'd circled, because Iowa State can really hit that. If they can hit that number, I think that they'll have a good shot at winning this game. And I think that Iowa State's offense didn't look good against Kansas State. I think that they're a better team on the road, though. We saw what they did against TCU. They go out on the road, and they're just fearless. They go out there, score right away, just put up the numbers at halftime, get them down early, and that puts a lot of pressure on the away team. And I think that going down and playing at Oklahoma State and Stillwater is going to be tough because of what happened last year. And obviously the scenario last year was, coming up to Ames, they had just lost their women's basketball coach. An interesting, story there. So they were a little bit down already, but it's a completely different environment now that Iowa State's going to play, and they haven't played in Stillwater, I think, in like 6 years or something like that, 5 or 6 years. So it's going to be an interesting matchup between Iowa State and Oklahoma State, and I think the crowd's going to play a huge factor in this game, just like it did when Iowa State played Oklahoma State last year.
Well, you've got to know that this crowd's going to be a really big factor, because it's not like it was a decade ago.
Yeah.
They remember that if they had not lost in Ames, in Jack Trice, if that field goal that their kicker missed is called good, they're playing in the national title game against LSU. That was a very big emotional loss for that school and for the team. They lose their women's basketball coach, like you said, very tragic, and it was a big blow to their school, and they remember that.
Yeah.
And that's a big thing that they're carrying into the game, like I said earlier.
And I like I said before, that Iowa State's really going to need to come out in this game and just come out off the chute and have a good offense, and they need Jared Barnett to lead this offense down. I think that they need to score first right away. We talked to Coach Metz today, and he said that he doesn't necessarily want the team to score right away, but he wants them to have a good offensive tempo, good rhythm, setting them up for going into halftime and so on. So I think if Iowa State can get off on offense, that'll be a good start, just like they did at TCU.
Yeah.
They're also going to need to play lockdown defense. I think that they're really going to need to stop the run. Obviously, as you said, Joseph Randall is a good quarterback, or a good running back, excuse me. Good on the ground, is real dangerous. And I think if they can establish the run early, that just sets Blunt or Walsh up for an unbelievable game. And I think that if Oklahoma State gets out early in this game, it could be a blowout. I think that they're that dangerous that if Oklahoma State gets out and Iowa State can't stop them, it might be a blowout win for them.
Whenever you go on the road, the number one thing is to almost always is to establish the run, but then on defense is to make the other team one-dimensional. Especially now for Oklahoma State, because they carry, like you said, Joseph Randall averaging 5.9 yards per carry, 6 touchdowns on the year. If they can stop him, make Oklahoma State one-dimensional with that freshman or whoever's their quarterback, that plays to their advantage. They can take those 4 defensive linemen or the 12 like you've seen them play, they can pin their ears back and just rush the quarterback.
And I think Iowa State's definitely going to need to win the turnover battle against TCU. They won it 5-1. Only had 1 turnover in the game against K-State, as I mentioned in the previous segment. So turnover margin is going to be huge in this game. A lot on the line in this game too. Iowa State could go to 5-2, and that would be huge for them moving forward. Because obviously the Big 12 schedule doesn't get a lot easier for Iowa State. I mean, they've got huge games coming up. Let's see, we got Baylor at home. That's going to be a good game. Number 6, Oklahoma at home. So the 2 games that very winnable games at home.
Big 12's gauntlet.
Yeah, absolutely. And then they got to go on the road at Texas. So the schedule does not get any easier for Iowa State. So Dean, I'm going to ask you, who's going to win this game?
You know, I said this today on our radio show. I think it's going to be very tough.
Yeah.
I think it's a hostile environment, and I think regardless of if they win or lose, this game is the pivotal game of their season. I believe that if they win, like you said, they go to 5-2. It changes their season, because I believe that if they win, they're looking at a bowl game, they're looking at 6 or 7 wins. But if they lose, they come back down to earth like they lost to Kansas State, kind of a heat check. And if they lose, I believe that they're going to be very lucky to get into a bowl game. I believe that the biggest thing is obviously the quarterback, Jared Barnett. He's got to be able to spread the ball early. He's got to be efficient, and like you said, they have to be able to win the turnover battle.
Yeah, he's got to be better than 16 completions, what he did in Kansas State. So Dean, does Iowa State go to 5-2 against Oklahoma State?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you. I took Iowa State today. I took them 24-21 in Stillwater in a very, very close game.
Okay, I've actually got Iowa State in this game as well. I picked against them against Kansas State. I think they go on the road. I love Iowa State on the road. Go against Iowa in a real hostile environment and get a big win down there. Play against number 15 TCU, get a win down there. So I like the streak. I think Iowa State continues it on the road against a good Oklahoma State team. I think they're gonna break that 28-point margin. I think they're gonna probably get about 35, 38 points. Oklahoma State, they're known to give up points, so I think Iowa State's gonna do it. I think they go down to Stillwater and get the win. Dean, thanks for breaking down this game with us, and you're gonna stay with us for basketball. Actually, almost forgot you're gonna be with us for the rest of the show.
Hoops.
We're gonna talk a little bit of hoops. I'm excited for this. We haven't really got to talk Iowa State hoops much. We had Media Day last week, so we're gonna talk about some of the big things that happened on Media Day. Talk to Coach Hoiberg. Coming up after the break, we're going to talk about the Iowa State men's basketball team. You're watching Cyclone InCYders.
The fall's been phenomenal. This group is absolutely working its tail off. It's a group of guys. A lot of them tasted the success from a year ago. The high school kids that came in that are freshmen come from great programs, come from winning programs, and are excited about getting going. And I'm telling you, this is a group that's going to be very easy to root for because of the type of kids that they are. They have great work ethics. It's been as good a group as I've ever been around, and all the teams that I played for, and certainly the third year of coaching here at Iowa State. This group absolutely gets after it, whatever it is, whether it's in the weight room, whether it's out here competing 2-on-2 situations when we had them in groups of 4, and since September 15th when we've had them as a whole team. These guys have a work ethic that's second to none. And how's that translate to wins and losses this year? I don't know yet. Obviously we lost a lot with losing our top 3 scorers, with Royce, with Scotty, and with Chris Allen. Collectively, I think we've got a great group to replace what we lost. The 5 seniors that we have on this roster are guys that want to go out with a bang. And it's a group that's again, really been getting after it, providing great leadership to these young guys. I really like our mix of younger players and veterans. To have the 5 freshmen and to have the 5 seniors, it's a good mix that we have right now, and it's a group that's going to push each other to get the best out of each other every single time we take the court in practices, and then we get out in the court during games as well.
Welcome back to the third and final segment of Cyclone InCYders. Matt Van Winkle, Dean Berhow-Goll. We're going to switch things from football now, Dean, to talking Iowa State men's basketball. Coach Fred Hoiberg brings in a bunch of new transfers, some new freshmen, loses Royce White, Scott Christopherson, and Chris Allen. So it's really a new team. Losing your top 3 scorers, it's really going to hurt this team, I think, but they've got some new guys that I think need to fill some big shoes. And what can you tell us about the incoming transfers, Dean? What can you tell us about Corey Lucius and Will Clyburn?
Like you said, they lose their top 3 scorers. They lose Scott Christopherson, clutch shooter. Chris Allen was really was another clutch shooter. Then you had Royce, who's obviously everybody knows the distributor, led Iowa State in every major statistical category. But they bring in a totally different type of player. 2 of them. You have Corey Lucius, clutch guy. He's played in 2 Final Fours for Michigan State. He had a big shot against Maryland to put them into the Final Four. As a matter of fact, after Michigan State's starting point guard, Kaylin Lucas, was injured. Lucius brings a dimension that Iowa State didn't have last year. They, like you said, they had Christopherson and Allen playing the 1-2 guards, but they weren't point guards. They were 2 shooting guards. They're both over 6 foot tall, bigger guys. What Lucius brings is that traditional point guard offensively and defensively. Offensively, he's going to be the floor general. He's going to run everything. He's going to lead the team, basically. And then at the same time, defensively, he brings something they didn't have last year. He's able to guard every quick point guard that the Big 12 has so many of. Last year that you saw Allen and Christopherson initially guard them, guys like Pierre Jackson of Baylor, Keaton Page of Oklahoma State. And then after those 2 lit it up, they had to put Bab on him, and then that takes away from your size on the wings. So what Lucius does is he's quick enough, he's tough enough, he's able to guard those quick point guards that the Big 12 has so many of.
Yeah, and I think it's big for Iowa State that now they have a true point guard. Last year they tried out Royce White, who did okay. That's 6'7" forward and bringing the ball up is kind of scary, but Scott Christopherson was not a true point guard. He played well. He didn't, he did okay. He did what Iowa State needed him to do in that position. But now they got a guy in Corey Lucius who. And we talked to him at Media Day, just a real good guy, and he's real smart too. And I think when Iowa State brought in Chris Allen last year, he had that Final Four experience, like at Michigan State. He's got the experience going to the NCAA tournament. But now you look at the rest of the lineup, and almost all these guys, with the exception of the freshmen, have been to the NCAA tournament. And I think that is huge moving forward. And I talked to Tyrus McGee, and I asked him, how important is it that this team made it to the NCAA tournament, got that experience? And he said, it's huge because we're going to be playing these big teams, good teams in the Big 12. We got the Kansases, just these powerhouses that it's going to be. They played Kentucky, who ended up going to win the tournament. So I think that playing a team like Kentucky and playing a team like UConn in the NCAA tournament under that pressure just adds another element to all these players' games. And they've got, as I said, the freshmen don't have that experience, but these guys have got talent. Let's talk quickly about the freshmen. George Niang is really the stud guy in this recruiting class for Coach Hoiberg. They got Sharon Dorsey-Walker, who's a shooter, and they got Naz Long and Nkurum Okoro, who are also guys that could see some significant minutes this year, and I think they are going to have a crucial part in this team this year.
Like you said, George Niang, he's the big prize for this recruiting class. He was number 56 in the ESPN recruiting rankings,
which doesn't really matter that much, but
it's
talents.
It's the first top 100 recruit that Iowa State's had since Brackens.
Right.
So it's very important. What Niang brings is he's very old-fashioned. He's a guy that can plant down just on the block. You can feed him the ball. But he also has a basketball IQ that Hoiberg praised. He plays like he's not a freshman. And I think the biggest thing that comes with Niang that's overlooked is he may be in the middle of that ranking range at 56, but he is so overlooked. He played at the Tilton School. He played for BABC, a big AAU team on the East Coast. He was overshadowed by playing with Nerlens Noel, the #1 consensus recruit in the country. So I think that Niang brings a lot to offer down low. I also believe that Naz Long, like Hoiberg said at Media Day, he's a guy that could see minutes behind Corey Lucius. He's also overlooked. Played at Finlay Prep, powerhouse AAU program on the West Coast. He played behind Iowa State fans will know Mike Kabongo, point guard for Texas, who was preseason first team. So I believe that Naslong is a little bit overlooked, Niang's a little bit overlooked, and I think that they're going to see a lot of minutes.
Yeah, and what a guy for Naslong to just shadow and Corey Lucius.
Yeah.
I think that's going to be huge for Iowa State if they want a true point guard, to come in here after, because Lucius is a redshirt senior, so he's done after this year, as is Clyburn. So those guys have 1 year here to make an impact. And the one thing I think that concerns me the most, Dean, about this team is that they're really not that big. And, you've got Niang, who comes in as a pretty raw freshman. He's got a lot to improve on. But, it seems like, from talking with guys like Anthony Booker and Percy Gibson, that they're actually learning from Niang, and that they're learning stuff about being a post player. And that, and I think that speaks to how, guys like Booker last year had to fill in. Booker kind of established himself as a little bit of a shooter last year. Yeah. But he's a big body, and he can go after and get those rebounds. And Percy Gibson, saw some significant minutes last year. Not a whole lot, but he went in there, and we saw some, bright spots out of him. And I think Percy Gibson and Niang are going to be those two guys at the post that are really going to need to step up this year. You look at guys like Clyburn. He's listed as a guard, but he's 6'7", so he's going to go in there and fight for rebounds. So I mean, it worries me a little bit, the rebounding edge that they're going to, they might have in the Big 12 especially. You got guys, at Kansas, at Baylor, that are just going to be physical freaks in there, guys that are in there that are going to be taller than them. But last year, Iowa State had Royce White to go to down low, and they don't have that this year. And I think that Niang is really going to have to fill some big shoes for Iowa State to be able to compete in the Big 12.
I think the big men, like you said, are going to have to step up. You've got Anthony Booker, also a redshirt senior. He's a big body. He's the guy they're expecting to play big minutes, not get in foul trouble, and also be able to stretch the defense on the outside. He shot over 40% as a three-point shooter last year, which is unheard of for a guy of his size.
Well, just look what Coach Hoiberg's done to the shooting on this team. He's recruiting shooters. He's recruiting this program to be shooters. He's bringing in a guy like Niang to be that physical presence, but he's really just recruiting shooters. That's what he's doing. That's what Coach was, That's what Coach was.
And that's the style in the Big 12, though. You saw guys in Iowa that weren't recruited by Iowa State as hard because Hoiberg is smart. He's recruiting for the Big 12. He wants to design a team that can win in the Big 12. Up-tempo, fast, transitional basketball, like a guy that we haven't quite brought up yet, Will Clyburn. He's that second transfer from Utah, averaged 17 points a game, almost 8 rebounds a game. He's a guy that also is going to play down low. He's I think he's around 6'7". He's a very lanky guy. He can play the 2-guard through the 4. And that brings versatility. And he's the guy that they're going to kind of expect to come in and pick up that scoring load that's going to be left behind with Scott and Chris Allen and more specifically Royce White. Hoiberg also said that Clyburn could be doing some facilitating as well. He's a guy that's vaunted for his scoring. But one more big thing that he brought up about Clyburn is his rebounding.
Yeah, and his ball handling too. And I think that's something that Coach Hoiberg preaches is that you've got to be a good ball handler. You've got to be able to do everything well if you want to be able to compete. And one guy we're leaving out here, who I don't know why, is Chris Babb, who's a guy that really was Iowa State's shutdown defender last year. He did so many good things. Didn't make the Big 12 all-defensive team, which I think he got snubbed. But Chris Babb's going to need to really improve his offense this year. I think that first half last year he was averaging about 10 points per game, but really started to slump after that. Really could not find his shot. Really started focusing more on his defense. Kind of interesting, once his offense started taking a peak down, his defense started elevating, which didn't hurt Iowa State too much because they had guys that stepped in there, like a Tyrus McGee that would step in there, and Anthony Booker that would step in there off the bench and provide them with the offense that they needed. But I think if Iowa State wants to compete this year as well, they need Chris Babb to score on offense.
Yeah, they need Babb. The thing with Chris Babb is that he is mainly an outside shooter. He's not much of a driver, not much of a distributor. He's their shutdown defender like he did last year. They won the game against Baylor because Babb was put on Pierre Jackson. Pierre Jackson absolutely lit up the gym in that first half. They were forced to put Babb on him, take him off of Quincy Miller, and that was the changing the game. But like you said, with Babb's offense, the thing where he struggled with was he was so inconsistent. You live and you die by the three-point shot, and Babb was living, but then he died. And he focused on his defense. The thing, though, that was good about it was he was so clutch. He was so timely in certain games. One thing that hopefully Cyclone fans remember is the Kansas game. He iced that game with the three-pointer at the end of the game to put it out of reach. He had shots like that, big, timely shots that they needed. He certainly didn't shoot over 40%. I don't even think he was over 35% on the year. But he was so timely, so clutch, and they are going to expect that out of him this year as a senior.
Absolutely, and a lot of guys are going to need to step up this year if Iowa State wants to have a chance to get back to the NCAA tournament for the second straight year. We're going to talk more Iowa State hoops throughout the rest of the year. They've got their first exhibition game on November 4th. against Minnesota State at Hilton Coliseum. Dean, thanks for joining us and filling in for Sam this week. Really appreciate it. I'm sure we'll see you more throughout the rest of the semester. Thanks for watching Cyclone InCYders. We'll see you next week.